The warning sirens screamed across New Zephyr Colony as another ship fell from the sky. Commander Veltar watched through the command center's main window as the burning wreckage crashed into the agricultural district. Smoke rose from what had been their largest food processing plant just hours ago. "Sir, we lost contact with the outer settlements," reported Lieutenant Kess, her blue-tinted skin pale with fear. "The Void Swarm has consumed everything beyond the third ring." Veltar closed his eyes for a moment. 3 billion Zephyrians lived on New Zephyr. Yesterday, there had been 4 billion. The day before that, 5 billion, across all their outer colonies. Now those colonies were gone, turned into empty husks of rock and metal. The swarm had eaten everything living, from the smallest bacteria to the great tree cities that had taken centuries to grow. "What about our defense fleet?" Veltar asked, though he already knew the answer. "Captain Mordine's ship was the last one," Kess replied quietly. "We watched it disappear into the swarm cloud 20 minutes ago. No signals since then." Veltar walked to the tactical display. Red dots showed the positions of swarm ships, thousands of them, moving like a dark plague across the star map. Each dot represented a living ship the size of a city block, filled with creatures that existed only to consume and reproduce. They had appeared at the edge of Zephyrian space 3 weeks ago without warning, and they had not stopped eating since. The Zephyrians had never been warriors. For over 1,000 years, they had been farmers and traders. They grew the galaxy's finest crops and made peaceful deals with other species. Their ships were designed to carry grain and vegetables, not weapons. When they tried to fight the swarm, their converted cargo vessels had been like insects, attacking a storm. "How long until they reach the core worlds?" Veltar asked. "At their current speed, 14 hours, Kess said. "Maybe less if they keep growing their numbers." Veltar stared at the red dots. Behind them lay 3 more Zephyrian worlds, home to 15 billion souls. After that, the capital world of Old Zephyr, where another 20 billion lived in the great underground cities. All of them would die unless something changed. "Sir," called Technician Reth from the communications station. "The Council is requesting an emergency meeting." "Tell them I'll be there in 5 minutes," Veltar replied. He took one last look at the tactical display, then headed for the meeting room. The emergency council consisted of 12 members, representing different colonies and districts. Today, only 8 attended. The others were dead or missing, their worlds already consumed. The survivors sat around an oval table in a room that had once been used for planning crop rotations and trade agreements. "We have to surrender," said Councillor Vex immediately. "Maybe if we offer them our agricultural technology, they'll let some of us live." "The swarm doesn't negotiate," replied Councillor Nith. "They don't want our technology. They want our flesh and our worlds." "Then we run," Vex said. "Load the ships with as many people as possible and flee to another part of the galaxy." "With what ships?" asked Councillor Tell. "The swarm destroyed our entire fleet. We have cargo vessels and passenger transports. Even if we could fit everyone, which we can't, those ships are too slow. The swarm would catch us before we reached hyperspace." Veltar listened to the arguments, but he already knew what they had to do. There was only one option left, though it terrified him more than the swarm itself. "We send out a distress call," he said. The room went quiet. Everyone stared at him. "A general broadcast," Veltar continued. "Open channel, maximum range. We tell the galaxy what's happening here, and ask for military help." "Are you insane?" Vex stood up, his chair scraping against the floor. "Do you know what will happen if we broadcast our location? Every pirate, slaver, and warmonger in this sector will come here." "Good," Veltar said calmly. "Let them come. Right now, we're going to die anyway. At least if other species know about this place. Some of them might have weapons that can fight the swarm. They'll fight each other over our territory," Nith said. "We'll trade one kind of death for another." "Maybe," Veltar admitted. "But maybe someone will help us. Maybe there's a species out there that actually fights these things and wins." "Name one," Vex challenged. "The Kazakh hegemony?" They'll demand half our worlds as payment. The trade syndicate? They'll offer to evacuate our valuable workers to their slave colonies. The consortium? They don't fight anyone. They just buy and sell whatever's left. I don't know who might come, Veltar said. But I know what happens if we do nothing. In 2 days, everyone in this room will be dead. Everyone on every Zephyrian world will be dead. The swarm will move on to the next system, and then the next, and no one will even remember that we existed. The room stayed silent for a long moment. Through the walls, they could hear distant explosions as the swarm's advanced scouts tested their orbital defenses. If we send this signal, Counselor Tell said slowly, we're not just risking our own lives, we're telling the entire galaxy about the swarm. Other species will learn that this threat exists. Yes. Veltar nodded. And that might be the most important thing we ever do, even if we don't survive to see it. Another explosion shook the building. Emergency lights flickered on as the power grid struggled. We need a vote, Nith said. All in favor of sending the distress signal? 5 hands rose. 3 stayed down. The motion passes, Nith announced. Commander Veltar, you have authorization to broadcast our situation to the galaxy. Veltar stood up. His hands were shaking, but his voice stayed steady. I'll prepare the message immediately. May the ancestors forgive us for what we're about to bring down on our people. He walked back to the communications station, knowing that he was about to make the biggest mistake in Zephyrian history. But as another explosion lit up the sky outside, he also knew they had no choice. The swarm would kill them all anyway. At least this way, their deaths might mean something. The technician looked up as Veltar approached. Sir? Are we really doing this? Yes, Veltar said. Open all channels. Maximum broadcast power. Send it to every corner of the galaxy. He paused, watching the red dots creep closer on the tactical display. And may whatever gods are listening have mercy on us all. The first ships arrived within 6 hours of the broadcast. Veltar watched them appear on the long-range sensors with a mixture of hope and dread. 27 vessels, moving in perfect military formation. Their design was angular and aggressive, nothing like the smooth curves of Zephyrian ships. Unknown vessels, this is New Zephyr Control, Lieutenant Kess transmitted. Please identify yourselves. The response came immediately, in a harsh voice that spoke Galactic Standard with a thick accent. This is War Commander Thex of the Kazakh Hegemony. We received your distress call. Prepare to be boarded for negotiations. Veltar felt his stomach drop. The Kazakh were known throughout the galaxy as brutal conquerors. They had turned a dozen peaceful worlds into military outposts, enslaving the populations to build their war machines. If the Kazakh were their only hope against the swarm, they had already lost. Tell them we'll meet on the orbital station, Veltar said. Full diplomatic protocols, sir. Kess hesitated. Should I mention the swarm's current position? Veltar looked at the tactical display. The red cloud of enemy ships was now only 8 hours away from the outer defensive ring. No. Let them see for themselves what we're facing. 2 hours later, Veltar sat across from War Commander Thex in the station's main conference room. The Kazakh was a massive creature, covered in thick brown fur with cybernetic implants, replacing his left arm and eye. 3 of his officers stood behind him, each carrying weapons despite the supposed diplomatic meeting. Your message was quite dramatic, Thex said, his mechanical eye clicking as it focused on Veltar. Extinction-level threat. Billions of lives at stake. Very touching. It's the truth, Veltar replied. The Void Swarm has already consumed our outer colonies. They'll be here in hours. Veltar replied, Yes, we scanned the approaching fleet on our way in. Impressive numbers. Thex leaned back in his chair. But not our problem. Then why are you here? Because you have something we want. Thex activated a holographic display showing the Zephyrian agricultural worlds. The finest farming worlds in this sector. Technology that can feed armies. Populations skilled in food production. You want to help us fight the swarm? Thex laughed, a sound like grinding metal. Fight them? Why would we do that? Much easier to let them do our work for us. Veltar stared at him in confusion. I don't understand. It's simple, Thex explained. The swarm kills most of your population for us. When they move on to consume other worlds, we move in and claim everything they leave behind. Clean, empty planets ready for Kazakh colonization. But our people will be relocated to more suitable worlds, Thex said. The survivors will work in our food production facilities. Good, honest work. Much better than being eaten, don't you think? You're talking about slavery. I'm talking about survival. Thex's mechanical eye focused on Veltar with a whirring sound. Your other choice is death. All of you. At least our way, some of your people live. Before Veltar could respond, Kess's voice crackled through his communicator. Sir, new contacts. 38 ships, different design. They're hailing us. Veltar excused himself and hurried back to the command center. The new ships were sleek and silver, moving with the careful precision of merchants. But their weapon signatures were too strong for simple cargo vessels. This is Trade Director Lax, of the Syndicate Commerce Fleet, came the transmission. We understand you're experiencing a population crisis. The Syndicate is prepared to offer humanitarian assistance. Within an hour, Trade Director Lax sat in the same conference room where Thex had made his offer. The Syndicate representative was thin and pale, with large black eyes and fingers that never stopped moving. Everything about him seemed designed to appear friendly and helpful. The Kazakh approach is so crude, Lax said with a sad shake of his head. Military occupation, forced relocation, barbaric. The Syndicate offers something much more civilized. Which is? Veltar asked. Voluntary evacuation. Lax replied smoothly. We have passenger ships waiting just outside the system. We can begin immediate extraction of your most valuable populations. Number 5. Valuable populations? Engineers, scientists, agricultural specialists. The educated classes. People with skills our colonies need. Lax smiled, showing pointed teeth. We offer them new homes on developed worlds, good working conditions, fair contracts. And everyone else? Lax's smile faded slightly. Unfortunately, our ships have limited capacity. We can only save those with essential skills. How many people are you talking about? Perhaps 50,000. Maybe 75 if we're creative with the space. Veltar felt sick. There are nearly 40 billion people in this system. Yes, it's tragic. But 50,000 saved is better than none, don't you agree? Lax leaned forward. Of course, the saved populations would need to work for the Syndicate to pay off their transportation costs. Standard indenture contracts. Nothing unreasonable. For how long? Oh, the usual term. 20 years. Maybe 30 depending on the individual's skills. Veltar stood up. Get out. I'm sorry. Lax blinked his large eyes. Get off this station and out of our system. We're not selling our people to you. Commander, please be reasonable. The alternative is death. Veltar finished. Yes, I know. But at least we'll die as free beings. Lax gathered his data tablets with quick, nervous movements. You're making a mistake, Commander. When your people are screaming in the swarm's feeding pits, remember that the Syndicate offered them a chance at life. After Lax left, Veltar returned to the command center. More ships had arrived during the meeting. The sensor display showed vessels from half a dozen different species, all hovering at the edge of the system like vultures waiting for death. Any word from the consortium? He asked Kess. Yes, sir. They're sending a merchant evaluation team to assess trade opportunities after the crisis resolves. Veltar laughed bitterly. Trade opportunities. They want to see what's left to buy after everyone's dead. Sir, Technician Reth called from his station. The Krillian Empire just arrived. They're offering to preserve our cultural heritage by taking custody of our historical artifacts and genetic samples. For safekeeping, I'm sure. Yes, sir. In their museums and research facilities. Veltar sank into his command chair and watched the tactical display. The Void Swarm was now 4 hours away. Around the edges of the system, alien fleets positioned themselves like predators fighting over a fresh kill. None of them intended to fight. They were all here to profit from death and suffering. Sir, Kess said quietly, maybe we should accept one of their offers. The Kazakh deal means some of our people would survive. As slaves, Veltar replied, working to feed Kazakh armies that will conquer other peaceful worlds. It's better than extinction. Veltar closed his eyes. Maybe she was right. Maybe survival was worth any price, even freedom. But when he opened his eyes and saw the alien ships circling their dying worlds like sharks, he knew he couldn't do it. Keep monitoring communications, he said. Maybe someone else will answer our call. Sir. It's been 12 hours. If anyone was going to help, they would have come by now. Veltar nodded, but he kept watching the sensors anyway. Somewhere out in the galaxy, there had to be someone who fought the darkness instead of feeding on it. There had to be. The alarms started screaming at exactly 1400 hours, ship time. Veltar jolted awake from a brief nap in his command chair and looked at the sensor displays. What he saw made him think he was still dreaming. Report, he called to Lieutenant Kess. Sir, we have massive energy signatures appearing at the system's edge, jump drives, but the pattern is unlike anything in our database. Kess's voice was tight with confusion. The computer can't identify the ship types or energy sources. Veltar studied the display. The new contacts were enormous, far larger than any fleet that had arrived so far. The computer showed over 400 individual vessels of various sizes, arranged in precise military formations. But their energy signatures were strange, a mix of technologies that shouldn't work together. Distance? He asked. 12 light minutes out, sir. They jumped in behind the gas giant, completely hidden until now. Any communication attempts? Nothing yet, sir. But the other fleets are definitely noticing them. As if summoned by her words, War Commander Thex's voice crackled over the emergency channel. New Zephyr Control. What are those ships? They're not in any of our databases. We don't know, Veltar replied honestly. They just appeared. Their formation suggests military purpose, came another transmission from Trade Director Lax. Possibly a new faction seeking to claim this territory. Before anyone could respond, a new voice cut across all communication channels. It was clear and confident, speaking Galactic Standard, with an accent Veltar had never heard before. This is Admiral Sarah Chen of the Terran Federation 4th Fleet. We received your distress call approximately 18 hours ago. Zephyrian vessels, please transmit your current tactical situation and civilian population status. All other vessels in the system, identify yourselves and state your business here. The communication channel went silent. Veltar stared at the displays, his mind struggling to process what he'd just heard. Terran Federation? The name wasn't in any galactic database. No species called themselves Terrans. And the casual authority in the Admiral's voice suggested she expected to be obeyed. Unknown fleet. This is War Commander Thex of the Kazakh hegemony, came the harsh response. This system is under Kazakh protection. You will identify your species and explain your presence here immediately. War Commander Thex, Admiral Chen replied calmly. I asked you to identify yourself and state your business. You've told me who you are. Now tell me what you're doing. The simple response seemed to catch Thex off guard. After a pause, he transmitted again, his voice more aggressive. We are here to provide humanitarian assistance to the Zephyrians. This is claimed territory under galactic salvage laws. Salvage laws apply to abandoned property, War Commander. These worlds are inhabited, and their government is still functioning. There's nothing here to salvage. Veltar felt a strange sensation in his chest. Something he hadn't experienced in days. It might have been hope. New Zephyr Control, Admiral Chen continued. This is Admiral Chen calling directly. Can you confirm your government status and provide current threat assessment? With shaking hands, Veltar activated his communicator. Admiral Chen, this is Commander Veltar of the Zephyrian Emergency Council. Our government is still functioning, and we definitely did not abandon our territory. We're facing attack by a species called the Void Swarm. They've already consumed our outer colonies, and will reach our core worlds in approximately 2 hours. Understood, Commander. Please transmit all available data on this void swarm. We'll analyze their capabilities and coordinate our response. War Commander Thex's voice cut in again, now openly angry. Admiral Chen, you have no authority in this system. The Kazakh hegemony was first to respond to the distress call. Any interference with our humanitarian mission will be considered an act of war. War Commander, Admiral Chen said, her voice still maddeningly calm. You're free to provide actual humanitarian assistance. Medical aid, emergency supplies, civilian evacuation if requested, but I notice your ships are positioned for territorial control, not rescue operations. Care to explain that? Veltar watched the tactical display as the human ships began to move. They spread out in a complex pattern that looked nothing like the territorial positioning of the other fleets. Instead, they seemed to be forming defensive positions around the Zephyrian worlds. Admiral, Trade Director Lax transmitted. This is Director Lax, of the Syndicate Commerce Fleet. We've already arranged evacuation protocols with the Zephyrians. Your presence here is unnecessary. Commander Veltar, Admiral Chen called. Can you confirm that you've agreed to evacuation protocols with the Syndicate? No, Veltar replied quickly. We rejected their offer. They wanted to take only a small number of our people as indentured workers. I see. Director Lax. That doesn't sound like humanitarian evacuation. That sounds like selective human trafficking. The channel exploded with transmissions as the various alien fleets began arguing with each other and demanding explanations from the humans. Through it all, Admiral Chen's voice remained steady and professional. All vessels, clear the communication channels. Commander Veltar, please transmit the swarm data on a secure frequency. We need to prepare defensive positions. Admiral, Veltar said hesitantly. Are you saying you intend to fight the swarm? That's exactly what I'm saying, Commander. We came here to render aid, and that's what we're going to do. Veltar felt his legs go weak. But Admiral, the swarm has thousands of ships. They've destroyed everything we sent against them. They're not just a military force. They're a natural disaster. Commander, I appreciate your concern, but the Terran Federation has dealt with hive-minded species before. Please transmit that data. Time is important. As Veltar ordered his technicians to compile and send all their information on the swarm, he watched the human fleet continue its deployment. The ships moved with a precision that spoke of extensive military training and experience. Their formations were complex but purposeful, clearly designed by people who understood large-scale warfare. Sir, Lieutenant Kess called, the alien fleets are repositioning. It looks like they're trying to stay out of the humans' way. Smart of them, Veltar muttered. Whatever these Terrans were, they clearly weren't merchants or scavengers. Their entire fleet screamed military competence in a way that even the Kazakh ships couldn't match. Admiral Chen, War Commander Thex transmitted, his voice now cautious rather than aggressive. We demand to know what species you represent and what gives you authority to interfere here. War Commander, we're humans from the Terran Federation. We respond to distress calls from civilian populations under attack. As for authority, we don't need permission to help people. But what do you want in return? The question hung in space for a long moment. Veltar found himself holding his breath, waiting for the answer. Every other species had wanted something. Territory, slaves, resources, profit. What would the humans demand? War Commander, Admiral Chen finally replied. We want the Void Swarm to stop killing innocent people. That's it. Veltar stared at the communications panel. In his entire life, he had never heard anyone answer that question the way Admiral Chen just had. Every deal, every negotiation, every interaction between species in the galaxy involved exchange. You give me this, I give you that. But these humans seemed to be saying they would fight and die for nothing except the principle that innocent people shouldn't be murdered. It was the most alien thing Veltar had ever encountered. The human fleet moved like nothing Veltar had ever seen before. In the span of 30 minutes, over 400 vessels had arranged themselves into defensive positions around every populated world in the system. They formed overlapping fields of fire, created supply lines, and established communication networks with a speed that should have been impossible. "Sir," Lieutenant Kess called from her station, "the humans are hailing civilian evacuation centers directly. They're asking for population counts and requesting permission to begin emergency evacuations." "They're actually doing it," Veltar whispered. "They're really here to help." On the tactical display, human ships were moving into position near the Zephyrian colonies. But unlike the other alien fleets, these ships were focusing on the civilian areas, not the resource centers or military installations. "Commander Veltar," Admiral Chen's voice came through clearly. "We've analyzed your swarm data. We're going to begin civilian evacuations from your outer defensive ring immediately. Our transport ships can handle approximately 2 million people per hour." "Admiral," Veltar said, "our evacuation ships were destroyed in the first attacks. How are you moving people so quickly?" "We brought hospital ships and colony transports, Commander. When we respond to distress calls, we come prepared for large-scale humanitarian operations." Veltar felt tears forming in his eyes. These strangers had traveled across the galaxy and brought hospital ships. Not just warships or cargo vessels, actual medical ships designed to save lives. "Admiral Chen." "War Commander." Thex's voice cut in. "You're interfering with established territorial claims. The Kazakh hegemony demands that you cease operations and withdraw immediately." "War Commander Thex," Admiral Chen replied. "The only thing I see you claiming is space. You haven't deployed a single rescue ship or medical team. If you want to help these people, start helping them. Otherwise, stay out of our way." "I warned you," Thex snarled. "This interference will be met with force." Veltar watched in horror as 3 Kazakh warships broke formation and moved toward one of the human evacuation groups. The Kazakh ships were massive, heavily armored, and armed with some of the most powerful weapons in the galaxy. "Admiral Chen," Veltar transmitted quickly, "the Kazakh ships are moving to attack. Their weapons can destroy entire city blocks." "Understood, Commander. Thank you for the warning." What happened next took less than 30 seconds, but Veltar would remember every detail for the rest of his life. The Kazakh ships opened fire with their main weapons, sending streams of plasma energy toward the human vessels. The humans didn't try to run or take cover. Instead, they shot back. The human weapons didn't look impressive. No bright energy beams or explosive missiles, just small, dark objects that moved faster than anything Veltar had ever seen. They hit the Kazakh ships and simply went through them, leaving perfectly round holes in armor that was supposed to be indestructible. All 3 Kazakh warships stopped dead in space, their engines shutting down, their weapons going silent. They weren't destroyed. They were disabled with surgical precision. "War Commander Thex," Admiral Chen said calmly, "your ships have experienced critical system failures. We're prepared to offer engineering assistance if you'd like to discuss cooperation instead of interference." The communication channels went completely silent. Every alien fleet in the system had just watched the mighty Kazakh hegemony get neutralized in half a minute by weapons they didn't understand. "Admiral," Veltar said quietly, "what did you just do to their ships?" "Kinetic penetrators, Commander. Dense metal slugs moving at significant fractions of light speed. Very effective against electronic systems when properly targeted. The crews are unharmed, but their ships won't be firing on anyone for a while." Veltar stared at the tactical display. The humans had just demonstrated military technology beyond anything in the galactic database, and they'd used it with restraint. They could have destroyed the Kazakh ships completely, but instead, they'd simply removed them as a threat. "Sir." "Technician," Reth called out. The Void Swarm just entered the outer system. Range, 45 million kilometers and closing fast. The tactical display updated, showing the approaching cloud of enemy ships. There were thousands of them, each one the size of a city block, moving in the chaotic swarm pattern that had overwhelmed every defense the Zephyrians could mount. "Admiral Chen," Veltar transmitted, "the swarm is here. You can see them on your sensors now." "Confirmed, Commander. We have visual contact with the hostile fleet. All human vessels. This is Admiral Chen. Execute Battle Plan Omega." Protect the civilian evacuation zones at all costs. The human fleet transformed again. Ships that had been focused on evacuations suddenly shifted into attack formations. Their movements were sharp and precise, like a machine designed specifically for war. But more than that, the humans sounded excited. Admiral, Trade Director Lax transmitted nervously. Surely you're not planning to engage that fleet directly. The logical approach would be tactical withdrawal and negotiation. Director Lax, Admiral Chen replied. There's nothing to negotiate with the swarm. They're a plague that consumes everything it touches. The only logical approach is to stop them. But there are thousands of them, Lax said. Even your advanced weapons can't possibly. Director, we appreciate your concern. But the Terran Federation has been fighting species like this for over a century. We know what we're doing. Over a century? Veltar's mind reeled. These humans had been fighting swarm-type enemies for longer than most species had known they existed. Admiral Chen, Veltar called. Are you saying you've encountered void swarms before? Not exactly the same species, Commander, but yes. Hive-minded devourers that consume entire worlds. We call them different names. The Hunger, the Endless Swarm, the Dark Fleet, but they all work the same way. They eat everything living and move on to the next target. And, you've defeated them? Every time, Commander. It's what we do. The confidence in Admiral Chen's voice was absolute. She wasn't boasting or trying to sound brave. She was simply stating a fact, the way someone might mention the weather or the time of day. All civilian transports, Admiral Chen continued. Maintain evacuation operations until further notice. Battle Group 7 will provide close escort. All other vessels, prepare for contact with hostile forces. Veltar watched the human fleet arrange itself between the swarm and the populated worlds. They formed a wall of ships that looked impossibly small compared to the approaching cloud of enemies. But somehow, the humans didn't seem concerned about being outnumbered. Commander Veltar, Admiral Chen called. We recommend you move your command center to one of our hospital ships. You'll be safer there during the engagement. Admiral, I appreciate the offer, but I need to stay here. These are my people. Understood, Commander. We'll do everything we can to keep your command center safe. As the swarm drew closer, Veltar realized something that made his hands shake. For the first time in weeks, he actually believed his people might survive this. These strange humans with their impossible weapons and absolute confidence had come from across the galaxy for one reason: to fight monsters and protect innocent people. The most terrifying part was that they seemed to genuinely enjoy it. The battle began at exactly 1600 hours, when the leading edge of the Void Swarm entered weapons range. Veltar expected to see the same chaos and destruction that had consumed his defense fleets. Instead, he witnessed something that changed everything he thought he knew about warfare. The human ships opened fire in perfect coordination. Thousands of kinetic rounds streaked through space like invisible death, each one guided by targeting computers that seemed to know exactly where every enemy ship would be. The swarm's leading vessels simply disappeared, torn apart by impacts moving at nearly light speed, but the swarm kept coming. For every ship destroyed, 2 more took its place. The cloud of living vessels pressed forward, trying to overwhelm the human lines through sheer numbers. Admiral Chen, Veltar transmitted, there are too many of them. You need to fall back to secondary positions. Negative. Commander, came the calm reply. We hold this line. No swarm ships reach the evacuation zones. Veltar watched in amazement as the human fleet did exactly that. They held their positions against impossible odds, their ships moving in perfect harmony to cover each other's weak points. When one vessel's weapons overheated, another moved to fill the gap. When a ship took damage, others closed ranks to protect it. Sir, Lieutenant Kess called out, the humans are using some kind of networked targeting system. Every ship in their fleet is sharing sensor data and firing solutions in real time. How is that possible? I don't know, sir. The processing power required would be enormous. They'd need quantum computers on every ship working together. On the display, the battle raged with an intensity that defied belief. Human weapons fired non-stop, each shot precisely calculated to cause maximum damage. But what impressed Veltar most wasn't their technology. It was their tactics. The humans fought like they had done this 1,000 times before. They anticipated the swarm's movements, countered their attacks, and exploited their weaknesses with the confidence of veterans. When the swarm tried to flank them, human ships were already in position. When the enemy attempted to rush their lines, they were met with crossfire from multiple angles. Admiral Chen, War Commander. Thex's voice came through the communications. How are you doing this? Our computers can't track your tactical patterns. War Commander, Admiral Chen replied, while her ships continued their deadly work. We've been fighting hive minds for a long time. They're predictable once you understand how they think. But the numbers don't win wars, War Commander. Training, coordination, and the will to fight win wars. As if to prove her point, a group of swarm ships broke through the human lines and headed directly for the nearest evacuation zone. Veltar's heart stopped as he watched hundreds of enemy vessels bearing down on civilian transports filled with Zephyrian refugees. But the humans were ready. A squadron of their ships moved to intercept, and what followed was the most beautiful display of precision warfare Veltar had ever seen. The human vessels danced between the swarm ships, their weapons firing in carefully timed bursts that destroyed enemies without hitting the civilian transports behind them. Within minutes, every swarm ship in the breakthrough was destroyed. Not one civilian transport was lost. Admiral, Veltar said, his voice barely steady, how did you train for this? Commander, when you've spent 200 years fighting species that want to eat entire civilizations, you get good at protecting the innocent. Admiral Chen's voice carried a note of sadness. We've lost worlds before. We've learned from those losses. 200 years? These humans had been fighting monsters like the swarm for 2 centuries? Veltar tried to imagine a species that had dedicated itself to warfare for that long. Not for conquest, but for protection. The battle continued for 3 more hours. Slowly, impossibly, the tide began to turn. The swarm's endless numbers meant nothing against human precision. Their biological adaptations were useless against weapons that could punch through any armor. Their hive-mind coordination was no match for tactics developed over centuries of fighting similar enemies. Sir, Technician Reth called out. The swarm fleet is breaking apart. They're scattering in all directions. Veltar looked at the tactical display in disbelief. The massive cloud of enemy ships was indeed fragmenting, individual vessels fleeing the battle as fast as their organic engines could carry them. Admiral Chen, he transmitted, they're running. Confirmed, Commander. Swarm-type species usually flee when they realize they can't win. They're parasites, not warriors. They only fight when they think they can feed safely. As the remaining swarm ships disappeared into hyperspace, Veltar realized something incredible. The humans had not only won the battle, they had done it without losing a single ship. Their formation was battered. Many vessels showed damage, but every human ship was still functional. Admiral, Trade Director Lax's voice came over the communications. That was impressive. Now, regarding territorial rights and resource extraction. Director Lax, Admiral Chen cut him off. The territorial rights belong to the Zephyrians. Always have, always will. As for resource extraction, I suggest you ask Commander Veltar's permission before you take anything. But surely there must be some compensation for your military assistance, Lax said. Standard galactic law requires payment for mercenary services. We're not mercenaries, Director. We don't charge people for helping them. Veltar listened to this exchange with growing wonder. The humans had just saved 40 billion lives and fought off the most dangerous enemy in the galaxy. Any other species would have demanded planets, resources, or political control as payment. The humans seemed genuinely confused by the idea that they should want something in return. Admiral Chen, Veltar said, I don't understand. You traveled across the galaxy, fought a massive battle, saved our entire civilization. What do you want from us? Commander, we want you to continue growing food and trading peacefully with your neighbors. We want your children to grow up safely. We want you to live good lives. Admiral Chen paused. That's what we fight for. The right of peaceful species to exist without fear. 1. Admiral Chen paused. But what about your people? Don't they want anything? Our people want to know that when someone cries for help in the darkness, someone will answer. Today, we answered. Tomorrow, if someone else needs help, we'll answer again. Over the next few hours, as the human medical ships treated wounded Zephyrians and their engineers helped repair damaged infrastructure, Veltar began to understand what made these humans different. Every other species in the galaxy saw weakness as an opportunity for profit. The humans saw it as a chance to help. Admiral Chen, Veltar said during their final conversation, there are other worlds out there facing similar threats. Other species that need help. I know, Commander. We monitor distress calls across this entire sector. There's always someone who needs assistance. You're going to leave, aren't you? To help them? Yes, Commander. That's our job. As the human fleet prepared to depart, Veltar realized the bitter irony of their situation. He had sent that distress call in desperation, knowing it would bring scavengers and predators to feast on Zephyrian suffering. He had regretted it from the moment the first alien ships arrived, but that same call had also reached the one species in the galaxy that crossed the void, not to conquer or exploit, but to stand between the innocent and the darkness. The humans didn't want territory or slaves or resources. They wanted something far more precious and far more alien. They wanted to be the ones who answered when someone screamed for help in the night. As the human fleet jumped to hyperspace, heading toward whatever crisis awaited them next, Veltar knew the galaxy would never be the same. Word would spread that somewhere out there, a species existed that fought not for profit or power, but because it was the right thing to do. The predators and parasites would continue to circle the weak, but now they would have to wonder, what if the humans were listening too?